they display even less interest in the will of the people. And the only remedy available to any of us is to find, nominate, and confirm better judges. Well, what's this passage about? It's about Roe v. Wade. It's about Roe v. Wade. This is the key passage. Federal judges today issue rulings and opinions on policy questions that should be decided democratically. What he's saying there is if states want to ban abortions, if their state legislatures want to vote that way, the courts should not get involved. But McCain doesn't come out and say that because Roe v. Wade remains pretty popular. Back earlier, McCain has been pretty open about his opposition to Roe, but in this way he's speaking in a kind of code. Now, second excerpt, even more elliptical, cryptic. Sometimes the express will of the voters is disregarded by federal judges, as in a 2005 case concerning an aggravated murder in the state of Missouri. As you might recall, the case inspired a Supreme Court opinion that left posterity with a lengthy discourse on international law, the constitution of other nations, the meaning of life, and evolving standards of decency. These meditations were in the tradition of penumbras, emanations, and other airy constructs the court has employed over the years as poor substitutes for clear and rigorous constitutional reasoning. The effect of that ruling in the Missouri case was familiar too. When it finally came to the point, the result was to reduce the penalty, disregard our Constitution, and brush off the standards of the people themselves and their elected representatives. Now, what's peculiar about that passage? He never says what the case is about. He says it's from Missouri in 2005, but he never says what was the issue in the case. Well, the case, as I'm sure many of you know, was Roper v. Simmons, and the case was about a 17-year-old boy who killed his neighbor and was sentenced to be executed. And the question presented to the Supreme Court was whether the United States was going to continue to execute children. And the Supreme Court said no. And Justice Kennedy wrote an opinion where he pointed to the stark reality that the United States is the only country in the world that continues to give official sanction to the juvenile death penalty. Likewise, he noted that since 1990, the only country to execute juvenile offenders were Iran, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Nigeria, Congo, China, and the United States of America. And Kennedy said no more. No more executing children in the United States. And you know what? That's actually a pretty popular position because as tough on crime as this country is, executing children is not a very popular position. But McCain didn't express himself that way. He didn't talk about what the real issue in the case was. So that, I think, gives some sense of what's at stake in the election when it comes to the Supreme Court. And I hope everybody votes accordingly. And with that, I look forward to taking your questions.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening, and I underline the word listening, to CNN legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin, author of The Nine, Inside the Secret World of the Supreme Court. Now we'd like to return to our speaker for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphones today are City Club Operations Assistant Maria Dabuta and Outreach Coordinator Deborah Agosti. Now, first question, please.
Welcome indirectly to Cleveland, Jeffrey. My question is this. The media gets a lot of criticism for its agendas. I assume that you and the media know more about what is going on than what we get to hear, whether we read or blog or internet or whatever. But in a case like Sarah Palin, when you feel that there are things that the American public needs to know, how do you walk the line between sharing information and doing it in as nonpartisan a way as possible?
Well, I think, again, it's very difficult to generalize about the media. I think there are all sorts of media outlets, and they handle things differently. Even cable news, you will get a very different answer if you're talking about Fox than if you're talking about MSNBC. I mean, they have very different agendas at the moment. Speaking, I guess really for myself, I am an analyst. I have I have close to carte blanche to say precisely what I think about what I cover. I'm not expected to be someone who is a completely neutral observer. I am allowed to express my opinion, and nothing holds me back. I mean, I have said, for example, that it is preposterous that Sarah Palin is claiming to be an opponent of the Bridge to Nowhere with this pork barrel project that she supported and then opposed. I mean, I sense in your question, and if I may paraphrase it and tell me if I'm wrong, is how come people aren't saying how stupid she is? And that, I think, is not our place. I think to a certain extent, people have to make judgments for themselves, and that kind of subjective ad hominem is not really does not have any place in what we do. But the oldest rule of journalism is show, don't tell. And if people want to watch that interview with Katie Couric last night and decide what they think of her, I think that's very appropriate.
Mr. Toobin, I've always remembered President Eisenhower's comment that he thought appointing Earl Warren was the worst mistake he ever made. And I wonder what you can tell us about the evolution of the process by which presidents vet potential candidates for the Supreme Court and how you see that going in the future.
Well, it's evolved tremendously. Byron White's confirmation hearings in 1962 were 8 questions. Ever since really Roe v. Wade, the process has been extremely political, and frankly, I think that's good. I don't have any problem with that, given the magnitude of the issues that the court decides, and given how broad this discretion of a Supreme Court justice is. Why shouldn't the process be political? I think in many respects it should be more political, that justices should be required to answer more questions than they do. They hide under this myth that they can't answer questions, and the senators let them get away with it. But the vetting process is extremely detailed. It varies by president, though. Clinton's appointees were very much reflective of Clinton's presidency. They're moderate Democrats. Ginsburg and Breyer are not William Douglas and Thurgood Marshall and William Brennan. They are moderate Democrats, but definitely Democrats. And Clinton got exactly what he wanted. George Bush got what he wanted. In Alito and Roberts, very conservative justices, and I anticipate that again the vetting process relates to the overall political situation. Barack Obama, if he wins, is likely to face a fairly substantially Democratic Senate, so I think he's going to have pretty much carte blanche to appoint anyone he wants. John McCain is going to face a Democratic Senate, so he will likely appoint someone who will not have the conservative paper trail that a Robert Bork did. But I have no doubt that he will appoint someone who will reflect those values on the court.
Good afternoon. Enjoyed your trip down memory lane through the history of the court. I want to go back to the Nixon years, if you can. Pentagon Papers. If Nixon hadn't given up the papers in D.C. back in the 70s, what do you think would have happened? I was a student at the time in D.C., very tense. U.S. Marshals coming in from all over the country. Had you given that any reflection?
Well, now, are you talking about the tapes case where he was forced to turn over the tapes?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Not the Pentagon Papers,
You're
the
tapes.
tapes case. Well, that's really a great question. I mean, that is one of the enduring constitutional mysteries. What if Reagan had what if Nixon had said, I am a coordinate branch of government. I don't have to comply with this order. Or what if, alternatively, he had simply set the tapes on fire, said, well, rather than turning them over, I'm destroying them.